Lacazette, come place your bets. How many goals do you think he can get? Sky's the limit, give him a minute. Scored on his debut, fast in it. Same as the mighty, in your righty. Maybe that's why he came to Blighty. It's a sign, now's the time to break the curse of number 9. Lacazette, don't break your sweat. Take the ball, put it in the net.
Hello, this is me, Lean from ArsenalVision.co.uk. Welcome to the very first Arsenal Vision post-match podcast of the new season. It's a mouthful. I'll hand you over to the good guys in a minute. But before I do, I just wanted to say a few words. It's been a while. Firstly, the tune at the beginning of the podcast was made and created by my good friend Roxy Arms, who you can find on Twitter. So if you want to watch the full video, go to the description and click on the YouTube link and watch away. Secondly, there's been a few issues with downloading the podcast via the Arsenal Vision website. Had a few people asking about that, but that's hopefully now fixed, so you can now get the podcast every match on the website. So that's it. Enjoy the podcast. Enjoy the football season. I'll sure speak to you one of these good days. Goodbye.
Hello, dear listener. We are about to get underway with an Arsenal Vision post-match podcast covering the scintillating 4-3 victory over Leicester on opening night Friday. Before we do that, though, I have to apologize. I had tremendous technical difficulties, and that's not a euphemism for problems in my life. I actually had internet problems that caused us to have to break up this recording into 5 different sessions. It was exasperating. We got through it. We have a pod. It is more or less complete. I am about to try to stitch it together. We'll see how that goes. But so I just want to apologize for this maybe not being the most coherent podcast we could have put together as a result of those difficulties. In any event, here is whatever I am able to make of the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. Enjoy. Massive gathering of disgruntled racists tops the headlines from the weekend as Chelsea lose 2-3 at Stamford Bridge. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. I think we should get started first and foremost by saying fuck Nazis. Shouldn't have to say that, but I think it's important to be on the record about it. And also fuck Chelsea and their racist gang supporters. They lost. It was brilliant. Just one of many fun storylines from the weekend, but of course the weekend started on Friday. We played under the lights. Really your typical Arsenal match. 1-0, 1-1, 1-2, 2-2, 2-3, 3-3, 4-3, and that's it. That's how you do it when you're the Arsenal. So I'm here mainly to introduce the men who are going to be telling you everything you need to know about the match and what to take away from it. So once you've blocked me on Twitter, you won't have to deal with my opinions anymore. That is, again, at Yankee Gunner. So first, Tim is on Twitter at Stilberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Hello, indeed. Clive is on Twitter at Clive PAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Clive, I think it's important that you acknowledge that 99.9% of everything I said in our brilliant match preview podcast came to fruition. So
absolutely,
thank you.
I'm just going to bow at your feet. You're absolutely spot on.
You're going to have to get pretty low to do that, my man. I am not tall of stature. In any event, Paul is here as well. You can find him on Twitter at Paz in my pants. Hello, Paz.
Hello.
Hello. Good. Yes. Nice flat hello. No woohoo. We're not doing that. Brand change? No.
I left all my woohoos behind on Friday. I was woohooed out.
You were woohooed out. Yeah. We by the way, we are now a sponsored podcast, so I have to just do a quick ad read and then we'll get into it. We are brought to you by the Barclays Premier League brand of pacemaker. That's right. If you're an Arsenal fan, you will want to call 1-800-GET-PACE. Also, Giroud has dialed that number many times. It was not what he thought it would be. In any event, you can get a pacemaker there, and I recommend it. So we'll start with Tim. Tim, before we get into all the nooks and crannies and all that, and there's a lot to get to, so we can just a quick moment on this. How strange was it to start the season on a Friday night? What was the mood like? I know there have been some ups and downs to this preseason. What was your sense of the experience of a Friday night under the lights, kicking off the entire Premier League season?
I really liked it, actually. I think given the fact that I can't even remember the last time we started a season at 3 o'clock on a Saturday anyway, I don't think, that's obviously all out the window now. So in lieu of that, I actually quite like the Friday night games, to be quite honest, so long as, I think the Premier League should do something where there should be a maximum distance for games they move to, weeknights. But if they're going to move them to weeknights, Friday night is as good a night as any, particularly I think at the beginning of the season. I do think it worked really well for something like that where the anticipation's there. Your team is the first one up, the first one that everyone's looking at. And particularly in an area like Islington as well, where the Emirates is, I think it really, really lends itself very well to a Friday night game. There's loads of bars and restaurants round, etc. Particularly decent in the summertime. So personally, I was all for it. Not entirely sure what the Leicester fans would have thought. I think you can still get a train back to Leicester at that time of night, but I'm not sure.
And also, fuck them, who cares? But yeah, okay.
But I loved it. I'm actually a fan of the Friday night games, and particularly first game of the season. Thought it really worked, and I thought it really contributed to that kind of that atmosphere of anticipation. That sometimes quite brief positivity you get before the first game of the season. Yeah. I much prefer it to starting on the Sunday and watching everyone else have their fun before that. I think it worked really well. I really liked it.
It's great when you win because it sets up a weekend of just being able to enjoy the Schadenfreude, not having to worry about what happens and being able to just take it in stress-free. And I also think it's great preparation for playing night games on unfamiliar days of the week, which we will be doing throughout the season. Paul, when the lineups were announced, there were a lot of predictable appearances based mainly on availability, but I think there were some curious decisions. Certainly Oxlade-Chamberlain being given the left wing-back role, even though he hadn't really excelled there in the Community Shield, which means Kolasinac had to play as one of the three center-backs, the other two being Monreal and Holding. Obviously some vulnerability there, not a lot of choice that the manager had. Ozil making the return, certainly encouraging. El Neni getting the start, Ramsey protected, and Lacazette getting the start up front. When you saw it, any immediate concerns, excitement, reaction, things you think he maybe should have done differently?
No, I don't think he had too many options, really, given the challenge with assessing the lineup was we didn't know the unknowns in terms of fitness. Where was Ramsey at? I didn't expect Mustafi, but you saw people saying, well, he needs to get Mustafi in there. Well, we got 38 games to play. Only he could tell if Mustafi was ready. I don't think any of us expected it. So, I mean, I think the front, whatever it is, front seven, made a lot of sense. Yeah, you can debate Ox, but I don't think it's a surprise.
We'll do an Ox section, I believe. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah. But nobody would have been shocked to see him on the left. People, one or two might have been disappointed, but nobody would have been too shocked. So I think it was pretty predictable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Ozil coming back in, it was unclear whether he should have, and I think he did look a little rusty. I mean, you could have made an argument for an Iwobi who has looked sharp this preseason and maybe was more prepared to start. But if you're going to be without Alexis already, I think you really would like to have one of those two in the side. And ultimately, he did contribute the sort of ball that started the move that got us the equalizer on the stroke of halftime. Clive, we'll come to the defensive issues momentarily, and that's obviously an important part of the narrative of the game, although I'm not sure that is the most important part of the narrative of the game. But Alexander Lacazette gets his Arsenal career off to a dream start. 90 seconds in, he's on the score sheet. Not the goal you would have expected. El Neni with a fairly straight ball into the box that he expertly heads down in the corner of the goal. How important is it, do you think, given some of the fan frustration, the sentiment that we know has been all too prevalent in terms of transfer business, the question of whether he was the right guy, how important was it for him to open his account in this game and do it as quickly as he did?
He did well, right? I think the view is, and I'm guessing the view is, maybe it's my own view, I think we all want him to be good. We all want him to...
We don't want him to be bad.
Yeah, but when I mean good...
We wanted Lucas Perez to be good too, I mean...
We want him to be as good as the price we paid for him, right? We want him to be that good, right? So we all secretly have our worry about a number 9 shirt. I look at him and think, okay, are you a Morata? Are you a Lukaku? Are you a Costa? Can you, own the front line on your own? And I did have a few concerns, but I have to say he's grown on me by the week, by the minute. And a lot of Arsenal goals we can see coming. We can see the progression. We recognise them. I don't know about you, but the goal sort of shocked me the way it went in. My first emotion was, wow, that's shocking. A first time cross into a crowded box, we don't do that. We don't have somebody who takes his first chance immediately. A surprise, it's almost like a surprise. And what's really becoming apparent, this guy's got layers to his game. He's got layers to his technique. He's definitely a player that combines. And I just like his calmness. And I mistook his calmness for, originally when I saw him in the Emirates Cup, I mistook it for not languidness, not laziness, but okay, maybe you're not quite with the intensity. But he actually knows exactly what he's doing. He approaches the ball in a calm, controlled way. His technique is solid. And I just think he's come to Arsenal, it seems like, at the right time. He's not like a young kid that's thrashing around, bursting his lungs, burning to try to do well. He's just calmly going about his business and calmly getting respect from everybody around him. And I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised what we're watching. I do think we need to use him. I do think if he hadn't scored in that game, I wonder what we'd have said. He had a purple patch at the start and a purple patch at the end, but there are periods in the middle where I didn't feel we used him. And Thierry Henry did an assessment of him tonight.
Saw that, yep.
Yeah, I've just seen it myself, and he picked some points I didn't really pick, and maybe Tim picked it in the ground with a wider view. That he was making runs and not getting found, and I think we got to get to know each other. I think he made a great point there, and we just got to use him more. That was my feeling: use him more, getting more touches. But actually, we'll develop a way of how we use him, and when we do that, I think we got a very smart forward. And of course, we're all secretly waiting for Alexis to come back, hopefully, and we see them together. We see all three of them together at peak fitness. And when that day comes, we'll know everything about the player that we bought.
You know what, Clive? The thing that really impressed me, though, I mean, he did some things that I thought he could do. He obviously had that one incredible mazy little dribble in the box from the Giroud pass after Giroud got in behind the back four. Ramsey found him with a chip, and then Lacazette shot brilliantly, saved by Schmeichel on the end of an in-the-box dribble. But the thing that really surprised me that I don't think I knew was part of his game was the pressing, the harrying, the work rate off the ball. He won the ball back. He put them under pressure. And when you have Welbeck in the side too, that really becomes a danger. And that, you get Alexis in the squad who will do that also. I think that adds a much more dangerous element to our game, allows us to get in a transition, allows us to attack lesser teams when they're not already in their low block and organized. And that, to me, was a really impressive piece of his contribution. Now, I get it. You're in front of the home crowd. You're trying to impress. Your adrenaline's up, and maybe that's a part of it. But if that is a real feature of his game, I think it's going to come in handy. Paul, you have a quick word to jump in there?
So, yeah, I think one of the other interesting aspects of Lacazette, a debate or a question that was had over the summer, was how good was he on the counter-attack? It was certainly a question Jane Cavendish had asked on Twitter, as she had some concerns about Arsenal in general, and certainly with Alexis Sanchez in the side, how efficient we were on the counter. She had some frustrations there. So that was kind of an interesting question. And from the bits of video I saw, he wasn't actually that involved in too many build-ups to the counter, maybe on the finish off on them when you watched him on the YouTubes, etc. We haven't seen that much of him, but he's been very efficient, very elegant, very slick on those counters. And I think you can say with every ball he gets, he does something with it. Lucas Perez had a bit of that. Every time he got the ball, he did something useful for you. And I think that's very much the case with Lacazette. He doesn't waste much. He's very efficient, silky, elegant. And the few times we've seen him countering, he's done some really nice things moving it along. I also, the other question I have with him, and I think it seems to be a positive so far, is that although he doesn't necessarily impose himself on a game, it's only because he's kind of in a sort of a stealth mode, finding space, being in the pockets. So, these are things to watch, but you kind of see these aspects to him that you say, if that keeps up, this could really be something. So you got to like him all around. Yeah, and I think obviously the goal is important, and that's what you need from your striker, but we have a striker who scores goals. His name is Olivier Giroud. We're looking to see
if Lacazette can do some of the things Giroud doesn't. And one of those is being able to press, being able to run, being able to get in behind, and also being able to help us pressurize and create transitions, and he's doing that. So, great to see. Tim, I'll give you an option here. You want to talk defense or offense? I mean, for me, the real story that's not getting the attention is how impressive we were in attack. I mean,
Amen.
A rusty Ozil, no Alexis, a formation that is ostensibly supposed to be more defensive in nature. Danny Welbeck playing, who's not necessarily a facilitator or an end product guy, did get a goal in the game, but we had a really good XG. We battered him on XG. We were constantly creating chances, especially through the first half. I thought we were imperious in attack. In your mind, is the fact that we conceded 3 goals, which I get it, that counts and that's important, is that obscuring the fact that this was a very encouraging, dominant attacking performance?
A little bit, yeah. It does suggest that perhaps the balance isn't quite there. And I think this has been an ongoing issue for some years with Arsene Wenger's teams, that every time he cracks the attack, the back door is left open. And every time he shuts the back door, we don't look as good going forward. And I still think it's a little bit seesaw. I just quickly add on Lacazette. I really liked his part in the second goal. And even though he did a bit of a Welbeck and really scuffed the shot, but if you watch the build-up to it, it's Ozil's got the ball, and Lacazette just puts his hand out on the defender, gives him a little nudge, and that really invites and gives Ozil the eyes. That's kind of give the ball to me. And I think that, assuming that Mesut Ozil stays, which I think he will, at least for this season, I think that's really, really encouraging that a striker who for once is looking for Ozil as much as Ozil is looking for him, if that makes sense. I think it's worth going back and watching that goal and just keep your eyes on Lacazette before that pass comes in. He really kind of sets it up, and he has in his mind what he wants to do. Unfortunately, he doesn't quite get the shot off, but it worked out. But
by the way, I mean, you mentioned balance. That goal is also a demonstration of that, considering one of our 3 center backs is the furthest forward
Indeed.
player who gives the ball to Welbeck for the goal.
Indeed, and I suppose that's probably more why I think there is interesting things. There are interesting things to say about the defence. Not necessarily all of them, brickbats and weren't we terrible. I think the things that really stood out for me were, even though we had 1 centre half available, he still went with 3 at the back, and that to me is really significant. Even though we had 2 left backs in there, he stuck with 3 at the back, and that tells me that he's really, really sticking with this, at least until things go really dreadfully wrong, which they might.
You don't think the fact that it was 4 at the back that got him the 2 goals late to win it might influence that?
No, because I think one of the things he likes is that he has the option to do that. He has the option to go 4 at the back. And he did it against Leicester at the back end of last season as well. He went 4 at the back for the last kind of 20 minutes and we went 1-0 up. I think that's one of the things he likes about it. I think the really interesting things that jumped out were that even though with pretty much no centre-halves available, he still went with it. I think another thing that's, maybe a footnote really is that Callum Chambers still completely not involved despite that fact, which obviously says a lot about his future. But even last season, when he was off on loan, he started the first game of last season. So I think that tells you something that we probably already knew.
And the irony is, I thought Holding's performance was very reminiscent of Chambers' first half against Liverpool. Maybe it was the one at Anfield where Chambers just could not pass the ball to a red shirt. Holding had a little of that going on.
Yeah, he did, and you could tell that Holding missed like a senior partner. But I think the other really interesting thing that kind of went on is I think I've been saying during pre-season that that middle centre-back role is so important, not just defensively, but from a kind of starting the play point of view. So I think it will be Mustafi who plays there because of the way he passes the ball. And if he's not there, it will be Mertesacker because of the way he passes the ball. And actually what's interesting, if you watch Adrian Clark did a really good kind of pre-season breakdown, and he identified one of the big weaknesses as the way we'd been passing the ball out of the back and how easily we'd been getting pressed and turned over. And Leicester did that to us a couple of times, and that came out. And I think not having that kind of ball-playing central centre-back kind of hurt us there. And the other thing that makes that quite interesting was how quickly Arsene Wenger has completely gone against the idea of playing Mohamed El-Neni there. We all spoke about it, and we had a fairly detailed WhatsApp conversation about it in pre-season, which never made it onto a podcast because Wenger went from doing it in pretty much every game, and I think that's because he didn't have, Mustafi available. He only had Mertesacker, and therefore I think he thought that El-Neni was the most natural replacement for Mustafi, someone to do that kind of role, passing it out the back. And he had Mustafi available. He had El-Neni available, and he still didn't play him there. Didn't play him there in the Community Shield, even when Mertesacker went off. He went from basically really talking up the idea of El-Neni playing that central centre-back role, and then it feels like he put him in there against Sevilla in the Emirates Cup, and we conceded a goal that was largely down to El-Neni. And that seems to have completely convinced him that he absolutely cannot use this as an option now. And I suppose that's what pre-season's for, right? Is to try these things out. And he probably thought, right, El-Neni's looked okay against Sydney Wanderers and etc. But let's give him a real test against Sevilla just to see if his defensive instincts are up to it. And he obviously decided not. So I think there are
my only counterpoint to that
things going on.
Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, no, that's done.
My only counterpoint to that was going to be that I think if you're going to play El-Neni as the most central centre back of the three, you need to put him in between two natural centre backs who have size and positional awareness and tackling, and he's not going to do that on a day when he's playing fullbacks as the other centre backs, right? No. So if there's any possibility that he might still want to use that as an option, it's going to be when he's got a Koscielny and a Mustafi or a Gabriel or Mertesacker, not when he's next to fullbacks.
Though Wenger did kind of rubbish the idea at the end of the experiment.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
He pretty much poo-pooed
it. He went
it.
360, didn't he? He went from this. This could be.
I was
really
just
good.
kidding.
It could be as simple as he wanted to give Joe Willock time in centre midfield in pre-season, and he wanted to give El-Neni minutes. As simple as that. Joe Willock and his brother had some. Obviously, he's left now, but there's some issues around treatment, contracts, playing time, and so he looked after him. He maybe selected him for the pre-season tour ahead of his time, and he looked after him and gave him minutes. Now and then he went at the back and got his minutes. I don't think there's any deeper than that in hindsight.
So let's talk about
details.
Let's talk about how they got their goals, Clive. And I think, as much as people have been critical of our defending, and the narrative from the sort of non-Arsenal media, the podcasts and journalists that aren't Arsenal specific, is, well, it's same old Arsenal, can't defend, sure they can attack and sure they're entertaining and fun, but they have no ability to defend, and that's going to be their downfall. And my feeling is that that's not exactly what happened here. Leicester had virtually no joy building up the play from the back, building up, playing long, anything like that. Where they got their goals and where they caused us problems was with us turning the ball over, and in some cases not under particularly a great deal of pressure, just making silly choices. Bellerin got the ball on the right wing, gave it to Ozil under pressure, he gave the ball away, they got a corner, they got a goal. Xhaka was given the ball in not a great position. Unfortunately, he and El-Neni had gotten sort of too parallel. They were on the same plane. Xhaka tried to play a ball to where he thought someone would be. No one was there. They got a goal from that. And then we gave the ball away twice cheaply and failed to clear our lines for their third. I don't think it's that we were open and gifting them chances and letting them play their way through us. I think we just couldn't stop giving the ball away. In your opinion, Clive, was really opening day jitters and just sloppiness more the culprit here than any sort of deeper problematic defensive organizational issues?
Yep. Yeah, so I like rugby as well, right? And sometimes when you play rugby, you have your 22, and what you have to do when you're defending your 22, you have to have an exit strategy. There's different ways to exit your 22 to get into touch, to get out the field. It's the same with football. If you look at teams now, teams are switching on when you have the ball, and our exit strategy coming out of our box was poor. The first goal, I think. Czech plays it to Monreal. Monreal turns, plays a pass very quick and early before El-Neni was really prepared. He pops it off to his nearest man, which he always does, pops it to his nearest man. It happened to be Xhaka, whose shoulders weren't turned correctly, so he pings it out to a blind pass out to where he hopes Bellerin's going to be. And they turn us over into our middle third, right? And they ping it into the box and score. It might have been the second goal, actually. So that was where we were weak. We just weren't slick at our exit strategy. And Leicester set traps. They set traps on Ozil. They set traps on Holding. And I watched Spurs on Sunday, the same thing. They set traps around John Joe Shelvey, and everyone's doing the same thing. Setting traps, 1, 2, 3 passes into the box, disorganised. You're most disorganised when you have the ball. And that's what everyone's doing. And we are poor at it, and we have been for a while. And this is the big Santi thing. He is great at an exit strategy. He gets us out. And it's not about massive pressing. It's just smart defending. You can either press by getting close to individual people, or you can press by cutting off passing lanes so you force a mistake. And Leicester did it very, very well, and were very, very efficient and scored from their 3 shots on target. So, yeah, it made us uncertain and nervy. And then, of course, then we start to look at the people standing in the back line, and you recognise you've got 2 left-backs and a 20-year-old kid that's balding. You think to yourself, OK, we got a problem here. But actually, if you look at it from a theme perspective, right?
Sorry.
You look at it from a theme perspective, there were 2 things wrong with us, right? And one of these things I'm not sure we can fix. One was our exit strategy, how we exited. And 2, we just lacked defensive dominance. Now, close your eyes and bring the top players back in and ask yourself, do we totally fix that question? Are we dominant enough defensively? Are we physical enough? Do we need to be more physical? I keep thinking about our first group. We still concede the most goals in the top 6 and the most shots on target. So we got to decide how we're going to fix that issue if we're going to progress this team. Because offensively, I think we've made an improvement.
Yeah.
Defensively, we're exactly the same, just as open, watching NBA basketball back and forth. Big green space in the middle. There you go.
I guess it's just, I don't know if I believe we're as open. I believe if you give the ball away in your third of the pitch, there's going to be players out of position. I mean, that's why Klopp plays the way he does. That's why Pochettino plays the way he does, because the easiest way to disorganize a defense is to win the ball back from them when they're trying to be progressive, right? When they're in the attacking phase and not settled into their low block and organized. I think, if you look at the one game where we really abysmally struggled in the back 3, and we weren't always brilliant in it, but the one game where we got absolutely dominated was at White Hart Lane against Pochettino's counterpress. And, I think that's still an issue, and it's still why I think I would love a central midfielder for us who can dribble, who can get out of tight spaces with his feet, because Xhaka gives that ball away that gives them the second goal in a position where maybe a Santi Cazorla takes a dribble, gets past those guys, and now we're in a counter-attacking position. I think Leicester are going to play a lot of games like this. They are bad defensively, but you look at what they've got in Albrighton and Vardy and Mahrez and Iheanacho and Okazaki, they're going to score goals. Do I think they get that goal? I mean, Czech was uncharacteristically poor coming for that ball that Okazaki scores, not to mention if Mustafi and Mertesacker and Koscielny are in there, I don't think they get that goal. And arguably not the Vardy header from the corner. So, I think that maybe there's an overstating of the defensive problems. And I know that's a crazy thing to say for a team that's been as poor defensively as we have been. I just didn't think that this game reflected the kind of defensive problems we have traditionally had, vis-a-vis open space and not being able to stop them from playing their way through us. Paul, why don't you give me your thoughts? I mean, defensively, was this just down to personnel and giveaways, or is this endemic?
No, I mean, it may well be endemic, and lots of people went to the tropes and the cliches about same old Arsenal, and you'd see the pundits arguing. By the way,
you can understand why they do that, Paul. I mean, let's be honest, right? We do not have sort of the moral high ground on this issue to say, oh, how can you say Arsenal can't defend? Like, I get it. I just don't think you could watch this game and hold this game up as an example of the kind of defensive problems we've had.
Well, spot on. I mean, you asked me about the lineup. I think the one thing we would have all agreed on that lineup is we're going to have a lively time in defense. It's almost not meaningful to assess our defensive part of this game. You'd also add in every game we've had against Leicester is a knife fight. From going back 2 years ago from their championship season, the first game where we trounced them 5-2 started by them going up, 2 goals first? That was the Santi Cazorla game at their place, and then we went, it was just ping pong all over the place, and they could have had more goals. We were definitely the better team on the day, but they easily could have had more goals that day. Mm-hmm. And similarly, kind of each one of the games was its own version of what we saw. But defensively, obviously, we were extremely vulnerable going into this game, and it's a lot more meaningful to talk about our offense, but that's not how it plays out in the pundit circle. So I think you can only take so much out of it when you look at the defensive. Now, some of the issues are common to our normal games, so people are going to find it hard to resist it, but still.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing.
Can I
just jump in? Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, guys. I think, Paul, you're absolutely right, and you can't take too much from the first game when you've got 2 left backs and a kid in defence, and we're chasing a game and we take off centre backs, we go forward at the back with a right winger at right back. You can't take too much from the event, and it's great that we actually won the game. But I do think we can learn from it, and by that I mean there was a period where we just kept playing through the thirds, when you just need to vary it and you just need to go longer. You need to recognise the traps and say, you know what, let me just turn them around for a couple of minutes, right? They're getting emboldened. They can see Vardy fancied it against our 3 defenders. He wanted to run at them. And we just kept playing in the wrong areas for too long, and we kept enticing them on, right? And I felt we just needed to just say, hold on, we're under a bit of pressure. Let's manage this game. Let's go down the sides. Don't come into the middle where they want to smash us. Go down the sides, go into the channels, and just stretch the game, move the emphasis of the game further forward. And I think we need to learn that. We can't just keep playing the Arsenal way, because eventually we're going to make a mistake, and eventually we're going to be exposed. And I think not just for this game, we've seen that many times last season. Again, it comes back to recognising what your exit strategy is, seeing the game in front of you. And I actually called for Giroud at half-time because he would simplify the game by making us go, we say, okay, there he is, we'll hit him. And straight away you're going over the press. And they were rubbish, by the way, in their box. They couldn't defend. Every time we put it in, they were just as shaky as us. And I just thought, recognise that, put pressure on them, make them defend much sooner, then we're going to win this game. But we spent too much time in our middle to bottom third. They got emboldened by doing that. They saw our weakness.
Yeah, Clive, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the interesting thing is just that this was a very chaotic game in a way, and that there wasn't a lot of control. We had a lot of chances, but we didn't have a lot of control, and I think that contributed to some of the patterns of play. Tim, I want to get your thoughts on 2 particular issues in the match that I think were interesting. The first is just Kolasinac. This is a player that I think can be really important for us. How important is it in your mind that he gets the chance to play left wing back, and how impressed were you with his attacking contribution?
Yeah, he looks to me every inch a wing back. He looks like he wants to bring the ball forward at every opportunity, which is fine. We've had quite a few defenders like that, I think, in the recent past. Thomas Vermaelen, Mustafi's a bit like that, guys who like to bring it into midfield. And I think, even at centre half, he looks like, just purely because of his physical build, he should be a good centre half. But I'm not saying he's a bad one, but he looks a lot more cut out for left wing back. And I, for one, once we get the likes of Mustafi and Koscielny back, would really, really hope to see him there. I think Nacho Monreal is absolutely, as a left-sided centre half, I think that's probably the ideal position for him at the moment, particularly because he's kind of beginning to hit that sweet spot where he's 31 now, where his defensive brain, and I think you can see this, his defensive brain is getting keener, but he's fast coming to the stage where his legs aren't going to be keener. So I think kind of on the left side of centre back is really going to suit him, and Kolasinac should just give us, certainly a burst of pace when he runs forward, but certainly of power as well. And it's probably an attribute we don't have a lot of. It's always very overplayed, isn't it? That Arsenal lack lack physicality and the rest of it, and I don't think that's been true really for a couple of years. But maybe on that left side a bit we do, and particularly if we're playing with wing backs and we've got Alexis coming inside a little bit more, then perhaps it is something pretty decent to have. And I think we saw, with his assist for Welbeck's goal, for example, and he had a couple of decent assists in pre-season where he really looked to get to the byline. And that's one of the things I quite like the look of as well. Arsene really likes a player that goes to the byline. I think certainly in the last 10 years, for me, the most archetypal Arsene Wenger goal is when someone gets to the byline and cuts it back. I think that's what he wants more than someone who chucks crosses in. And that's why Bellerin, for me, is definitely ahead of Oxlade-Chamberlain as a right wing back. If you want someone to chuck a cross in from the touchline, yeah, Chamberlain's probably better at that. But if you're talking about combinations and getting to the byline, which is a much, much better place to try and tee your strikers up from, then I think Bellerin's got that combination play, that give and go. And one thing I'm really looking forward to as well is the kind of potential partnership between Kolasinac and Alexis, because you've got Alexis, particularly in this formation, just tucked in a little bit away from that left-hand side. And at the end of last season, we saw a lot of combination play between Monreal and Alexis, because you've got Alexis coming inside, and obviously the defence's first thought is, right, what's Alexis going to do when he goes towards goal? So that's the angle they want to shut off first. And quite often that left space for Nacho Monreal. And I think Kolasinac, as a guy who really looks like he likes getting to the byline, I think that's a partnership that could look really interesting. And obviously they're both pretty powerful players as well, both on and off the ball. And I think potentially, and someone like Lacazette, if we're getting to the byline nice and quickly, nice and sharply, then I think Lacazette is someone that could really benefit from that supply line as well.
Absolutely. And look, the data supports it, because if I'm correct, I believe that the XG of chances created from crosses out wide is relatively low, whereas the XG from pullbacks from the baseline are relatively high. So obviously you'd want to maximize creating those kind of chances. And look, I mean, it is, without a doubt, it was part of Leicester's strategy to take advantage of the lack of power and size in our backline. They played their throw-ins long. They tried to crowd the 6-yard box. Their crosses, went into a crowded penalty area. That's how they approached their corner kicks. There was a lot of direct play from them when they won the ball back, and I think they targeted that personnel that we had back there. But Paul, I mean, I think one of the issues that you have to discuss as you go through this game is Oxlade-Chamberlain. And I don't think either one of our wingbacks particularly shined on the day. Hector Bellerin did nearly score a goal, almost squeezed one under Schmeichel when he probably should have put it across the box anyway. But I don't think either of them were particularly brilliant, but Ox was very, very quiet until he got switched to right back. I guess two questions. One, just maybe you can talk about his performance on the day a little bit and why you think the manager made the choice to swap the wingbacks when he went to the back four, moving Hector to the left and Ox to the right. And then just what Ox's role is going forward, because if Kolasinac is the left wing back of the future and Nacho Monreal presumably would be the understudy to that role, and if Hector Bellerin is the starting right wing back and there's no indication he's going to play him in central midfield, does he have a role? So, and Clive, I'll give you a chance to chime in on this as well. So those two things, Paul. I mean, Ox's performance and the swapping of the wingbacks, and then where he goes from here.
Yeah, where he goes from here is the bigger question that I don't think there's a good answer for. Maybe I'll leave that bit to Clive. On the day, I guess I saw it a little bit different to you, which is I think he was very, very, very busy. He wasn't quiet. He just wasn't very eye-catching.
Well, yeah, just statistically, he completed 8 dribbles. I mean, that is an astonishing number. What's crazy is he had one key pass. I mean, you'd like to believe that when you're dribbling 8 times successfully, that you are opening up passing lanes to make the right decision at the end of that, and that wasn't happening.
I think that's fine if you're counting key passes, assists, and goals, but sometimes you're the guy who gives the pass to. So if you look at the goal that goes up through the Danny Welbeck goal, that started by Ox making the right choice. If you look at, I think it's the the mazy dribble, as you described it, of Lacazette. It's Ox who swings the ball from the right wing across to Ramsey, who picks it up and plays it in. So I really didn't. He didn't have his most brilliant game, but when I had a really good look at what he did, I mean, he did more of everything than almost any player on the pitch. He had more blocks, he had more tackles, aerial challenges, interceptions. I mean, he was number one or number two for everything. So he wasn't quiet. It might have been you could argue it's Coquelin, like in that he did a lot of shit. It's whether it amounted to anything. But I actually think he played a role in that game, and it was like it's the old XG chain or the XG build-up role, which is he was the guy who passed maybe 3 or 4 down the line, but he did his job. He kept the ball, or he took a shot, but after beating 4 players.
What would be your answer to the claim that at 2-3 down, his head went down, and he had a really bad period where it seemed like he was just sort of pouting on the pitch? Because I definitely feel that his attitude stunk during that a stretch of the game there when we went behind again.
I actually thought all through the game he had this kind of funky body language, but and I'm not saying it didn't have some impact, but I also remember times when he was the guy who was switched on. He had Mahrez covered at the far post when the ball was coming in the first half, making tackles in the second half deep into the game in our back pocket in areas that Holding and Bellerin weren't snuffing out play. So he was. I'm not saying he was brilliant. I'm not saying I couldn't pick holes in aspects of his game. I'm not saying he wasn't in a bit of a funk and his head isn't thinking about a move somewhere else. But for most of that game, he was. You don't end up having more busyness than everybody else on the pitch for no good reason. So I think he's probably struggling with things a little bit if he's really looking at a move. But I certainly wouldn't write off his whole game. I think he can, a dribble up the wing where he decides his best option is to lay it off to Ozil to do something with is not the worst call in the world.
I love that. No, I love that, Paul. My problem is the dribble up the wing where he goes all the way, past everybody and then past everybody again and then past everybody again and then gives it away, or gets to the baseline and then at the end line and then floats across in the touch, or gets to 22 yards out and then takes a pot shot. My problem with him isn't when he does the simple thing.
I don't think he did much of that. I think if you look at what he did in this game, that relates to a game or two I think we saw during the kind of the preseason. I think he was pretty tidy, pretty clean, kept the continuity going. I'm not saying you couldn't find a couple of moments. I think overall, at the end of the day, what's more important is he staying or is he going, and do we want him to stay or do we want him to go? But in this game, he might have had a couple of moments. I think overall he was good. I know why. In my mind, I know why he was switched. We brought Giroud on. Ox is not going to be the best crosser from the left wing, but he might have been our best crosser from the right wing.
Yes, I will agree with that. Yes, he puts a better ball into the box, and we saw that from the right. He put in a scintillating low cross in. But I agree with you that once Giroud is there... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a reflection on Bellerin in my book. The manager mightn't want to admit this, but Bellerin was having a pretty iffy game. He didn't look like the guy who was going to make the difference. And Ox is a guy who might have made the difference that night. So to me, that's a little bit of why the switch came about, but mostly because Ox could run at them from the right, shake things up, and get some crosses in.
Yeah, and I mean, I will acknowledge that. I mean, I think the alternate opinion would be to protect him a little bit where he was struggling on the left. But I definitely think once Giroud's on the pitch and you want to start getting balls into the box more, you're going to get better crossing opportunities from Ox on his stronger foot. Clive, why don't you chime in on the wingbacks, how they played, what the roles were, what you thought of Ox's performance?
Ox was one of our better players on the day.
Tim, I'm going to need you here in a minute, Tim.
Because I'll tell you why. Because he drove us forward, right? Elneny had a poor game. He lost a bit of confidence in his distribution, so he was a little bit muted. Xhaka does his normal role, but he needs pistons around him. He drove us forward. And I actually thought Bellerin had one of his worst games. I'm one of his biggest fans. And if we're playing European Cup final tomorrow, I think he should play. But I felt he left Rob Holding alone. He left him to die. He did not help his mate out at all. That channel was screaming out for some sort of seniority and leadership. I felt Bellerin should have helped him a lot more. And what happens is, I always find that Bellerin is a great sort of wing back when there's space to run into. And what Leicester did, they retreated quickly, and Ozil was a little bit off his game, so he didn't have his wall pass. So if you notice, every time he got the ball in the right-hand corner, he did a Theo, where he just knocked it back. I'm like, okay, he got the pre-assist for the first goal. We did that about 10 times in the game. So he never threatened behind them hardly at all, because there wasn't much space. Whereas Yox now, he dribbled up to his man, and he beat his man, and then done his work. I felt he was more of a threat, and that's why Wenger pushed him over to the other side. So I think we got, with the two of them, if you're looking for a deep block team at home, I think the Ox is the better option. Top 6 team where we have less of the ball and it's more about transition, I think Bellerin's a better option. And away from home, when we're not going to dominate, I think Bellerin's a better option. If you look at I always go back to the 2 games, City and Chelsea. City, I think Ox played right wing back against City, and I thought he was very, very good. But in the cup final, I don't think I've seen Bellerin play any better. I mean, it was a game where there's lots of space to run into, and he did really, really well. So it's a difficult one, but the problem is one's got a 6-year contract and one's got 11 months to go, and our investment is in Bellerin, and so Wenger's trying to look after him. If Ox is sulking, it's because he's having to play on his left foot and he's not a left wing back, yet we're judging him in that position, and I think it's really unfair.
That may be unfair, but having said that, he hasn't nailed down any position and made it his, and I'm not saying that's necessarily his fault.
And that is fair. That is fair.
Yeah, and that is fair. You know, if his route into the team right now is left wing back, you can pout about it, or you can try to make yourself undroppable. Look, I get your point. I don't think Bellerin was very good in this game, but Tim, quickly on Bellerin, because I want to also touch on Ramsey and Giroud, the substitutions that won the game for us. But I mean, do you have an alternate view, perhaps, on Oxlade-Chamberlain's day? Hopefully.
I thought it was. I thought in many ways it was a fairly typical Oxlade-Chamberlain game. I thought it was quite eye-catching, precisely because, you know, all of those stats, they're quite eye-catching things, aren't they? Dribbles, interceptions, things like that. But then you ask yourself, where was the end product? And there wasn't any. In a game where we scored 4 goals, that was fairly open, that, like we've said, we attacked very well. I don't think Chamberlain really contributed to any of that. And yeah, so it was all a little bit. You know, we have an expression in England, all fur coat and no knickers, and that was kind of what it struck me as, really. That sounds
fantastic, by the way. I could go for some of that.
But I don't think he was absolutely dreadful or anything. I just thought that, once again, in the physical aspects of the game, in getting in front of his man, in, you know, beating a player, he can do those things. We know he can do those things. But when it came time to use the brain, he was lacking again, and he just didn't make the right decisions. On the switching the 2 fullbacks over, I think it's a mixture. I agree that Bellerin wasn't great. I think I may be inclined to give him a little bit of mitigation in terms of he came back a bit later for pre-season. He was at the Euro under 21s, and, you know, he's not as deep into his preparation as some of his teammates are. You know, it remains to be seen. If in 5 or 6 games Bellerin is still playing like this, then no, that's not the explanation. But that could be an explanation. In terms of swapping them over, I think it's a bit of both, actually. I think, when you've got Giroud on, getting Chamberlain on his stronger side makes some sense. But one thing Arsene Wenger does not do, if he thinks a player is a problem or he thinks the player is struggling badly, he doesn't move him into an unnatural position. And I don't think he's ever put Bellerin on the left before. I can't think of a time that's ever happened. And it could be a little bit that he thought, well, actually, let's play the averages here. Chamberlain on the right will probably do more than Bellerin on the right, and therefore it's worth doing. But and I think there was an element of that. But at the same time, I don't think he moved Bellerin, to get him out of the way, or because he thought he was struggling. Because if he thought that, I think he'd have just taken him off, quite frankly, or done something else with him, or perhaps put Bellerin and Chamberlain on the right together. He doesn't move struggling players out of position. Generally speaking, it's not something he does. So I think he thought, well, Bellerin can cope on his left wing back, but Chamberlain's not really coping there at the moment. And in fairness, that's not really Chamberlain's position on the left hand side. Particularly, I think he can play the left side of a front three, because you've got a lot more avenue to cut in from there or get to the byline. But when you're a wing back, it's about providing width and actually. Wing backs, like you can do that inverted winger thing, but you don't really tend to have inverted wing backs. That's not generally how they work. So, again, there's a fair bit of mitigation maybe for Chamberlain that having to play as a really true wide player. But like I said, at the same time, that I don't think that entirely explains the fact that he got himself into some good positions, but when he got to those positions, he just didn't make the right decisions for me.
Yeah, I think there are parallels with Kieran Gibbs. In the sense that we do see Gibbs get into good positions. He definitely has the athleticism to play in that position, but he just can't seem to make the right final decision. And when you guys were defending Oxlade-Chamberlain last season against my efforts to slander him immensely, you were saying, well, he's finally giving us end product. He's giving us goals and assists, and that's what he needed to be doing. And I think what we've seen, albeit, in preseason and then in this game, was he had those 8 dribbles. He did get into good positions, but when there are 9 men ahead of you and you're chasing the game and you shoot from 24 yards out, 25 yards out, that's not the right choice. When you dribble your man and dribble another man and dribble another man and then give the ball away because you don't have your head up, that's a problem, and I just think we see that from him too much. Tim, I think a player who made a huge impact, a huge difference, there were 2 of them. They were the substitutions the manager made, and while they were obvious ones, I think the manager deserves the plaudits for making the changes that won the game. Aaron Ramsey had a critical contribution to the win here, but what I think is really important, if there's one thing that has been the problem with Aaron Ramsey since his purple patch a few seasons ago, it's that he has been a poor finisher. He's been poor in the box. He's underperformed XG. How encouraged were you by that gorgeous one touch to control and perfect second touch to finish in terms of what that would mean to Arsenal if Ramsey is indeed coming back into the kind of form that saw him look like he could be one of the best attacking midfielders in Europe?
Yeah, if you go back to the end of last season, he's now scored, 3 in a row? He scored the last game of last season against Everton, scored in the cup final, scored again on the first game of the season. We know that Ramsey can be quite a streaky player in this regard, but we also know that he needs a bit of a run of games. And hopefully, the fact that he's had a pretty full pre-season is very helpful. But hopefully, that summer gap hasn't done anything to abate this, some sense of a run of form, some sense of momentum. So I think it could be very significant. But obviously we've got to look after his fitness. The fact that he didn't start, I think, was part of that as well, because I think we remember what happened on the first game of last season. And indeed it's happened many times with Ramsey where he broke down. That would be enormous for us if we could get him, even if he could get to 10 this season, that would be really, really big. It would take some of the kind of, because, let's face it, last season it was basically Alexis or death, really. That was it. And then Giroud popping up with some important goals here and there. But it really was becoming a one-man band. And maybe the way Alexis plays kind of predicates that does happen. But I think if we can bring Ramsey to the party and bring Lacazette to the party a bit, then I think we're looking at, offensively, we're looking at something really, really formidable. and it will be interesting to see how all of that works out. I think I kind of said pre-match that without Alexis, that Ramsey is in a way our closest player to Alexis in terms of he has that real risk-reward factor. And I was saying that if he was fit enough, I would have actually played him, perhaps alongside Ozil in one of those number 10 spots for a game like this, precisely because I think risk-reward is something that you perhaps need to do against teams like Leicester, who, to be fair, I thought were going to be more defensively formidable than they actually were.
Scoring in the first 90 seconds probably threw everybody's match plan into disarray, to be fair.
Well, yeah, indeed. And I just felt, like I said, I think Ramsey in many ways is our most similar player to Alexis. What will be interesting is if Ramsey can keep that up, while Alexis is in the team. If he still feels empowered to make that run, whether it's him on the back post receiving that ball, telling Walcott to get out of the way, or whether Alexis is just there going, "All of you fuck off, it's my ball." That kind of remains to be seen. But I don't know. I think hopefully if he can just stay fit and just get a run of games together and get this partnership with Xhaka going, and also I think it's worth noting that it was Xhaka that played the ball to him. If that brings some sense of partnership, that's been the biggest thing for Ramsey over the last kind of 3 seasons or so. It's just so stop-start. And if he can just hit that stride a little bit, and I think at the moment with the squad as it is, he is an absolute undisputed starter alongside Granit Xhaka. El Neni or Coquelin aren't a huge threat to him, neither is Jack Wilshere. So if he can just keep that kind of momentum going and stay fit, then he could have a very, very good season.
Yeah, and with all due respect to El Neni, I mean, you saw his limitations on the day, and you got a very quick look at the difference that Ramsey can make. I think we shouldn't forget the sumptuous chip pass he played to Giroud, that Giroud laid off to Lacazette that led to that mazy run in the box and the save. I mean, that was a sensational pass that Mesut Ozil would be proud of. So a really good contribution from him. But for me, the thing that's been missing from Ramsey, fitness aside, is composure, control, and precision in the box. And the way he took that ball down to set himself up on his stronger foot and then finish it, that's exactly what he's been missing. And if that's there, that composure and control in the box, it's going to make a huge difference for him and for us. And Paul, the winner goes to Giroud. Just an absolutely incredible display of strength. We know that this man is one of the best headers of the ball in the game, one of the strongest center forwards in the league. He showed that as he was being undressed and just bodied defenders off of him. A huge sweep of that meaty forehead to get the ball to go in under the crossbar. Great team celebration and a phenomenal release in front of the home fans, given all of the negativity that just surrounds Arsenal in general, but that could have been surrounding us, and what's happened on opening days in previous seasons. To get the win was so important, and he gets the headlines for that. First of all, just how impressed were you by the strength and the finishing that he showed to be able to get that one in the back of the net, or near the back of the net?
Yeah, I think it was superb, and we mentioned his contribution earlier with the Ramsey chip over the top and the clever layback to Lacazette. Mm-hmm. He didn't get the ball too much because he was so heavily marked, but every time he got it, he did something significant. I think we've said he looks a different player when he comes on with 20 or so minutes to go. He's suddenly fast. He's already strong, but he's much stronger, all on a relative basis, but it really makes a difference to his game, and maybe it's actually the showcase he needs coming into the World Cup next year, ironically, is to be in this two-striker scenario. I mean, the other interesting aspect was seeing Lacazette shifting to the left effortlessly and finding ways to contribute and dovetail, and you probably heard, I didn't hear the interview, but Giroud joking with a wink of the eye about how good Lacazette looked from the left. So,
clever.
There will be games this year where we're really glad we have both those strikers. Maybe it's Giroud coming on with 20 minutes to go, or maybe it's a lineup where, when we talk about Ox and his role in the team, I mean, that's all determined by, sadly, who's still standing come January, We've too many players for too many positions always in August or September. Now, I understand
rarely
that's
by
not
November. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So it will all change. But you really I couldn't believe, I mean, we all knew it, but I couldn't believe when Wenger's saying, I opened the door to Giroud. I mean, we all knew that was the case. But if we're going to win this damn thing, you don't sell Giroud. You don't let him go. You just don't. What team would give up his goals? Because it's not like it's Lacazette or Giroud. The goals Giroud is going to score for us are probably utterly different goals at different times from the bench or from a different problem that we're trying to solve than Lacazette was. So you give up. If Giroud gets 15 goals for us, it's not 15 goals some other striker on the pitch was going to get. They were the 15 goals coming off the bench, or because that was the kind of player we needed against that team. It's, I love Arsene, but man, this is the year to be an utter bastard. I don't care what promises you made.
Well, you're staring a rebuilding process in the face next summer, potentially, based on the players who could be out of contract. So if you're not going for it this year, I don't know what the hell you're doing. And I agree with you. I think he is an important contributor to the team. I think you have to start to make some decisions about who you're selling and who you're keeping, because if you are keeping Alexis without a deal and Ozil without a deal, I'm fine losing Alexis and Ozil for free, but if you're going to lose Alexis and Ozil for free, you better get some money from someone. Oxlade-Chamberlain seems like the obvious choice there. Clive,
sadly.
I want to just make a point about Giroud. So it's a tremendous goal, and it comes at such an important time, and it gives us such a critical win to start the season. And yet what I think it obscures is the fact that as great as the goal was and as wonderful a servant as he has been, we were absolutely devastating in attack throughout this match before he came on, and arguably in a more defensive setup. Let's face it, 3 at the back is a more defensive setup than 4 at the back. Do you think there's a danger that when you come on and you score the winner as a late sub, that it makes the argument that you should be the guy who should be leading the line, when in fact having the mobility and energy and pressing and chaos that Lacazette and Welbeck bring had us attacking just fine? I mean, I'm thrilled that Giroud got that goal, but it really doesn't change anything in terms of how we want to play from the start, does it?
Not really. I think Giroud, I agree with almost everything Paul said about Giroud. I thought the goal was unbelievable. I mean, he's got Harry Maguire by his neck. You see, there's a bit on TV, you see Harry Maguire walk off the pitch, and he's got scratch marks on his neck, and he looks crestfallen. He's got Wes Morgan hanging off the back of his shirt. He manages to pin them both and then directs it into the postage stamp. I mean, it is unbelievable goal, and there isn't many people that can do that, right? And I think he is valuable. I think it's really interesting, this whole game. It's interesting the way you guys see it compared to how I see it. And what I will say is that game was shown in 176 countries. So the whole world was watching us. And on the day when our goalkeeper was shaky, our young centre-half had his worst game for Arsenal. We had a left-back playing centre-back. We had another left-back charging up the field into the penalty box and having an assist. We had Oxlade-Chamberlain, we were ready to sell him. We had Bellerin had an average game. We had Xhaka doing his thing but gave way and made a mistake on the second goal. Elneny was invisible. We've got Drew, we've got questions about. We've got Welbeck, we've got questions about. We've got Lacazette we're learning to bring into the team. We had Ozil wasn't fit. And we won 4-3, and probably the best game of the season, best game we've seen at home for I don't know how long. There's so many things not right, but there's so many things right. And within the minutes that we played well, we played really well. And if I look at Arsenal from 30,000 feet looking down, we just need to reduce the amount of goals we concede. And it's whether we really prepare to do that. Because even on the first weekend, most of our competitors did not concede any goals apart from Liverpool. So that's what we've got to fix. But I do think we won't see the real team until the transfer window shuts. And I've just seen an article come out saying next season all the teams want to bring the transfer window to close earlier, because we're actually disappointing the fan, because we're watching a phony war at the moment, because no, the squads are complete, and it's a real shame.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, Clive, look, we've said this on this podcast to the point of exhaustion. All of us on this pod, all of us as Arsenal fans, the reason we fell in love with Arsene Wenger was in part the trophies and the winning, of course, but in part Arsenal football, changing it from 1-0 to the Arsenal to the prettiest football in the country, and Arsene's beautiful flowing free-form football. And we've talked about how we've missed that, how we haven't been fun to watch, how we've gone a couple of seasons where we had been pretty hard to watch, frankly. And I think, I will take some car crash comedy defending if it means a little bit more of the kind of scintillating attacking football that we've been known for. I don't expect us to win the league. I expect us to compete, but I expect us to play football that is true to Arsene's philosophy, and he has the players to do it now. And at least in this first game, that's exactly what happened. We attacked and attacked and attacked some more, and eventually we were able to bang their door down. So it's three crucial points. It's important contributions. I mean, you can't ask for much more than your big money striker coming in and opening his account. Aaron Ramsey coming off the bench and scoring brilliantly. Giroud coming off the bench and scoring brilliantly. I think Welbeck getting a goal is important, even though he kind of scuffed it in, because he's a player we've talked about so much that if he adds end product, he's going to be devastating. A final word over to you, Paul. I mean, what's the coda that you put on the 3 points we got for the day?
Well, I mean, by far the most important thing is the 3 points. 4-3, terrible defending. Who gives a shit in a while? It's almost like the Community Shield. The only thing that matters was the 3 points from the first game of the season. But as you're talking about, like, the football we've all missed, I've enjoyed a lot of the football that others haven't. But I will say this: the last 3 meaningful games we've played now, I would call them competitive games, although it includes the Community Shield in my book. The FA Cup final, the Community Shield, and this game on Friday night against Leicester were all absolutely cracking games. Dramatic, fun, wonderful to be an Arsenal fan at. Doesn't remove all of the sins and misdemeanors of the season that went before. But when you just if you were to live those 3 games, we're absolutely spoiled. Unfortunately, we're absolutely tortured for other parts of the season. But right now and going forward, if we can keep this up, which we can't, but 3 games like that in a row, just sensational. Yeah,
I have no problem watching that kind of football. I mean, I know it makes some people pull their hair out when we're conceding 3 goals at home, but I mean, it beats some of the stale shit that we've seen. I enjoyed it, and I think that's well said. I appreciate you guys going, at least the 2 of you who are over in England, going pretty late because of our technical difficulties, so thank you for that, and I am sorry that happened. I take full responsibility, and I will be sacking myself in the morning. Tim is on Twitter at Stilberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Clive, appreciate it.
Thank you, young man.
Paul's on Twitter at Pausing in My Pants. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Woohoo!
Woohoo, indeed. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. I will iron out whatever these technical difficulties were so that we can get a little more flow into our game as we are hopefully talking about beating the Orcs. In the meantime, maybe put a little energy into Liverpool's Champions League qualifier. I mean, I guess, if you really, really want to be pragmatic about it, you could say we want them to get into the Champions League because then they'll have a harder time domestically. But I'd still be fine with them getting knocked out. In any event, could be an interesting week in the transfer window. You never know. So we will come back after the next match, talk about all the stuff that did or did not happen in the window. Liverpool losing by 6 goals to Hoffenheim. I think that's who they're playing. And then, obviously, we might even talk a little bit about our 7-0 victory over Stoke. Until then, cheers, and up the Arsenal.